My family abandoned me in a nursing home after years of being a difficult, critical mother. My only joy became the letters I exchanged with a young soldier overseas, someone who saw past my flaws and became my closest friend. After a year of correspondence, he was finally coming home to visit me. When he walked through the door, I discovered the most shocking truth about who had been writing to me all along. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more amazing stories every day. Now, let's head back to that lonely nursing home room. The Sunset Manor nursing home wasn't the worst place to spend your final years, but it certainly wasn't where I had imagined I'd end up. At 78, I found myself in a sterile room with beige walls, a narrow bed, and a view of the parking lot that reminded me daily of all the visitors who never came to see me. My name is Eleanor Whitfield, and I suppose I should be honest about how I ended up here, alone and forgotten by the family I had raised. It wasn't entirely their fault, though it took me far too long to admit that. I had always been what people politely called strong-willed, and what others less charitably described as difficult, critical, and impossible to please. For decades, I had ruled my household and my family with an iron fist wrapped in what I thought was love, but was really control. When my daughter Rebecca chose to marry a man I deemed beneath her station, a kind, hardworking electrician named Tom, I made my disapproval known at every family gathering. When my son Michael decided to become a teacher instead of following his father into the family accounting business, I spent years making pointed comments about wasted potential and impractical dreams. I criticized Rebecca's parenting, questioned Michael's financial decisions, and offered unsolicited advice about everything from career choices to home decor. I thought I was being helpful, sharing the wisdom of my years. What I was actually doing was slowly, methodically, driving away everyone I loved most. The final break came 3 years ago, after my husband Walter's funeral. In my grief and stubbornness, I had refused to sell our large family home, despite my children's gentle suggestions that it was too much for me to manage alone. When I fell down the stairs and broke my hip, they tried again to convince me to move somewhere safer. I accused them of trying to steal my independence, of wanting to put me away so they could get their hands on my house. The words I said that day still echo in my mind. "You're just waiting for me to die so you can sell everything and split the money? Well, I won't make it that easy for you." Rebecca had looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Mom, we just want you to be safe. We love you." But I was too proud, too hurt, too set in my ways to hear the love in her voice. I heard only what I expected to hear: criticism, impatience, a desire to be rid of the burden I had become. After another fall 6 months later, I finally agreed to move to Sunset Manor. But by then, the damage to my relationships was complete. My children visited dutifully for the first few weeks, but my continued criticism and complaints eventually wore them down. Rebecca would come by and I would find fault with her appearance, her children's behavior, her husband's latest project. Michael would call and I would lecture him about his teaching salary and his unrealistic dreams of writing a novel. Gradually, the visits became less frequent, then stopped altogether, except for obligatory appearances on holidays. I told myself I didn't care, that I was better off without their constant disappointment in me. But the truth was, I was desperately lonely and had no idea how to bridge the chasm I had created. It was Mrs. Patterson, one of the nursing home's activity coordinators, who suggested I join the Pen Pal program. "We've partnered with a military support organization," she explained. "Soldiers overseas often feel isolated and appreciate letters from home, and our residents enjoy having someone to write to." I almost dismissed the idea immediately. What would I have to say to some young soldier? What could we possibly have in common? But the alternative was sitting in my room, watching the parking lot and waiting for visitors who never came. "Fine," I said, with the same enthusiasm I might have shown for a root canal. "I suppose I could try it." A week later, I received my first letter from Sergeant Benjamin Torres, stationed in Afghanistan. The letter was polite but distant, clearly written by someone fulfilling an obligation rather than seeking genuine connection. "Dear Mrs. Whitfield," it began, "thank you for agreeing to correspond with me through the Pen Pal program. I'm 24 years old and have been deployed for 8 months. I'm from Chicago originally and joined the Army after college. I hope you're doing well. Sincerely, Benjamin Torres." It was the kind of letter you might write to a distant relative you'd never met. Polite, safe, revealing nothing of substance. I almost didn't respond. But something about the careful formality of it reminded me of myself, someone keeping the world at arm's length, afraid to show any vulnerability. I decided to write back, but instead of matching his formal tone, I chose to be honest in a way I hadn't been with anyone in years. "Dear Benjamin," I wrote, "your letter was very polite, but I suspect you're about as enthusiastic about this pen pal arrangement as I was. I'm 78 years old, living in a nursing home, and my family has basically given up on me, probably with good reason. I've spent most of my life being critical and difficult, and now I'm reaping what I've sown. But if you're willing to write to a cranky old woman who's trying to figure out how she got so alone, I promise to be more interesting than my first impression might suggest." I told him about my view of the parking lot, about the terrible food in the dining hall, about Mrs. Henderson in the next room who played her television too loud and seemed to think every conversation required shouting. But I also told him about the books I was reading, about the memories that kept me awake at night, about the regrets that felt heavier than any physical ailment. His response surprised me. Gone was the formal politeness, replaced by something that felt genuine and thoughtful. "Dear Eleanor," he wrote, "your honesty was refreshing. Most people want to hear that everything is fine, that we're all heroes over here doing important work. The truth is, I'm scared most of the time, homesick, and questioning a lot of the decisions that led me here. I joined the Army because I felt lost after college and thought the structure would help me figure out my life. Instead, I'm more confused than ever, just confused in a desert on the other side of the world." He told me about the heat, about missing simple things like ice cream and his mother's cooking, about the friends he'd made and the constant worry about their safety. But he also asked questions about my life, about the books I mentioned, about what it was like to have lived through so many decades of change. Our correspondence became the highlight of my weeks. Benjamin wrote with a maturity that belied his age, and he had a way of asking questions that made me think about my life from new angles. He wanted to know about my childhood during the Depression, about what it was like to be a young woman in the 1960s, about the changes I'd witnessed in technology and society. In return, I found myself sharing stories I hadn't told anyone in years. I wrote about meeting Walter at a USO dance during the Korean War, about the early years of our marriage when we were poor but happy, about the dreams I'd had before I became so focused on controlling everyone around me. "I wanted to be a writer once," I confessed in one letter. "I had notebooks full of stories and poems, and I was convinced I was going to be the next great American novelist. But then life happened. Marriage, children, responsibilities. I told myself I'd get back to it someday, but someday never came. Now I wonder if I gave up too easily, or if I was just afraid of failing." Benjamin's response was immediate and passionate. "It's never too late to write," he insisted. "You have decades of experiences, wisdom, perspective that younger writers can't possibly have. Maybe you gave up on your dream, but that doesn't mean your dream has to give up on you." His encouragement meant more to me than I could express. For the first time in years, someone was seeing potential in me rather than just problems. As the months passed, our letters became longer and more personal. Benjamin wrote about his fears for the future, about feeling disconnected from his family back home, about the guilt he carried for things he'd seen and done in the war. I wrote about my regrets, about the relationships I'd damaged, about the loneliness that felt like a physical ache. I think I've forgotten how to love people without trying to fix them. I spent so many years pointing out everyone's flaws that I forgot to appreciate their strengths. My daughter's kind and patient and raises beautiful children, but all I ever focused on was her choice of husband or her housekeeping. My son is passionate about teaching and genuinely cares about his students, but I could only see his modest salary and lack of ambition. I turned love into criticism, and now I don't know how to turn it back. Benjamin's response was gentle but direct. Maybe the first step is admitting what you just admitted to me. Maybe they need to hear that you see their strengths, that you're proud of who they've become. It might be too late to undo the damage, but it's never too late to stop making it worse. His words stayed with me for weeks. I began to see my past behavior with new clarity, to understand how my attempts to help had actually been attempts to control, how my love had been conditional on my family meeting my expectations rather than accepting them as they are. It was in my 10th month of correspondence with Benjamin that I began to suspect something. He had mentioned details about Chicago that were very specific, a particular restaurant that had closed years ago, a neighborhood festival that only locals would know about, memories of winter storms that matched my own recollections perfectly. When he wrote about missing his grandmother's apple pie and described the recipe in detail, I felt a chill of recognition. It was my recipe, the one I had taught my daughter Rebecca, the one she had probably taught her own children. Benjamin, I wrote in my next letter, I hope you don't mind me asking, but what's your mother's name, and what neighborhood in Chicago are you from? His response took longer than usual, and when it came, it was shorter than his typical letters. Her name is Rebecca Torres. She was Rebecca Whitfield before she married my father, and I think you know exactly who I am, don't you, Grandma? I stared at the letter for a long time, my hands shaking. Benjamin Torres, my grandson, Rebecca's oldest son, the boy I had barely gotten to know before my criticism and demands had driven his family away. He would be 24 now, exactly the age he'd claimed to be. I tried to remember the last time I'd seen him. It must have been at least 5 years ago, at a tense family dinner where I'd spent the evening criticizing his choice to study literature instead of something practical. I had been writing to my own grandson for almost a year, sharing my deepest thoughts and feelings with him, and he had been doing the same with me. We had gotten to know each other in a way that had never been possible when we were trapped in our roles as critical grandmother and defensive grandson. My first instinct was anger. How dare he deceive me? How dare he use a false identity to trick me into revealing my vulnerabilities? But as I sat with the letter, reading it over and over, I realized that he hadn't used a false identity at all. Benjamin Torres was his real name. He had taken his father's surname when his parents married. And everything he had told me about his life, his fears, his experiences, had been true. The deception, if it could be called that, was in not revealing our relationship. But hadn't I been equally deceptive? Hadn't I shown him a version of myself in these letters that I had never shown him in person? The grandmother who wrote to him was honest, vulnerable, encouraging, and interested in his thoughts and dreams. The grandmother he had known growing up was critical, demanding, and impossible to please. I spent 3 days crafting my response, writing and rewriting until I found the words that felt true. Dear Benjamin, I finally wrote, I know who you are. I think I've known for months, but I was afraid to admit it because I was afraid you would stop writing to me. These letters have been the best part of my life for almost a year. Through them, I've gotten to know my grandson, really know him, for the first time. And through them, you've gotten to know a version of your grandmother that I wish I had been brave enough to show you years ago. I don't know why you chose to write to me under these circumstances, but I'm grateful that you did. You've given me a gift I didn't know I needed. The chance to love you without judgment, to encourage you without criticism, to be the grandmother I should have been all along. I understand if you want to stop writing now that the truth is out, but I hope you won't. I hope we can continue to be honest with each other, to share our thoughts and fears and dreams. I hope we can build on what we've created through these letters. I love you, Benjamin. I've always loved you, even when I was too proud and stubborn to show it properly. Thank you for giving me the chance to tell you that. His response came quickly, and it was the longest letter he had ever written. "Dear Grandma Eleanor," it began, and I cried just seeing those words. "I joined the Pen Pal program because I was lonely and homesick, and when I saw your name on the list, I recognized it immediately. I almost requested a different pen pal, but something made me curious. I wanted to know who you really were, underneath all the criticism and expectations. I wanted to know if there was a person there that I could actually connect with. I never intended for it to go on this long, but your first letter was so honest and real that I couldn't help but respond in kind. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could talk to you without being judged, without feeling like I was disappointing you just by being myself. These letters have meant everything to me. They've helped me get through some of the hardest months of my life. But more than that, they've given me hope that when I come home, maybe we can have a real relationship. Maybe we can be family in a way we never were before. I'm coming home next month. My deployment is ending, and I'll have 2 weeks of leave before I report to my next assignment. I want to come see you, if you'll have me. Not as your grandson fulfilling an obligation, but as Benjamin, your friend who happens to also be your family. I love you too, Grandma. I always have, even when it felt impossible to show it. The day of Benjamin's visit, I was more nervous than I had been in years. I had asked Mrs. Patterson to help me with my hair, and I had chosen my best dress, a blue one that Walter had always said brought out my eyes. I sat in the common room, watching the door, my heart pounding with anticipation and fear. When he walked in, I recognized him immediately, though he was taller and broader than the young man I remembered. He was wearing his dress uniform, and he looked confident and mature in a way that took my breath away. But it was his eyes that I recognized most, kind, intelligent, searching. He saw me and stopped, and for a moment we just looked at each other across the room. Then he smiled, the same smile I remembered when he was a little boy, and walked over to where I was sitting. "Hello, Eleanor," he said, using the name he had called me in his letters. "It's good to finally meet you in person." I stood up, my legs shaky, and without thinking, I reached out and hugged him. He hugged me back, and I felt 20 years of regret and longing pour out of me. "I'm so sorry," I whispered into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry for all the years I wasted being critical instead of loving. I'm sorry for not seeing what a wonderful young man you were becoming." "I'm sorry too," he said. "I'm sorry for staying away, for not trying harder to connect with you. I'm sorry it took a war and a pen pal program for us to find each other." We spent the next 3 hours talking, really talking in a way we had never done before. He told me about his experiences overseas, about the friends he had made and lost, about his plans for the future. I told him about my regrets, about the loneliness of the past few years, about how much his letters had meant to me. "He wants to ask you something," he said, as our visit was winding down. "Would you be willing to see Mom? She misses you terribly.
but she's afraid you'll just criticize her again. She doesn't know about our letters, doesn't know that you've changed."
I felt my throat tighten. Do you think she would want to see me? After everything I've done? I think she's been waiting for you to want to see her, he said gently. She loves you, Grandma. She always has. She just didn't know how to deal with the constant criticism. I don't know how to apologize for years of being wrong, I admitted. Maybe start with the truth, Benjamin suggested. Tell her what you told me in your letters. Tell her that you see her strengths now, that you're proud of the life she's built, that you love her without conditions. 2 weeks later, Benjamin brought his mother to visit me. I had spent those 2 weeks preparing, not just emotionally, but practically. I had asked Mrs. Patterson to help me write down some of the things I wanted to say, afraid that my nerves would make me forget, or worse, revert to my old patterns of criticism. When Rebecca walked into the common room, I barely recognized her. She was 52 now, with silver threading through her brown hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of years of laughter and worry. She was beautiful in a way I had never allowed myself to see before. Not the kind of beauty that comes from perfect features, but the kind that comes from a life lived with kindness and purpose. She hung back near the door, clearly uncertain, while Benjamin gently encouraged her forward. I could see the wariness in her posture, the way she held herself ready to deflect whatever criticism I might launch at her. "Hello, Mom," she said quietly, and the simple word nearly broke my heart. When was the last time I had heard her call me that without obligation or resentment in her voice? "Rebecca," I said, standing up from my chair, "you look beautiful. You look happy." She blinked in surprise, clearly not expecting a compliment. "Thank you," she said cautiously. "Please, sit down," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "I have some things I need to say to you, and I'm afraid if I don't say them now, I might lose my courage." She sat down slowly, her hands folded in her lap, and I could see Benjamin giving her an encouraging nod from where he stood nearby. "I owe you an apology," I began, my voice shaking slightly. "Not just for the things I said the last time we spoke, but for years of making you feel like nothing you did was ever good enough. I spent so much time trying to fix what I saw as your mistakes that I never told you how proud I was of your successes." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. "You married a good man. Tom is kind and hardworking, and he loves you and your children completely. I was wrong to criticize your choice. I was wrong about a lot of things." "Mom," Rebecca said softly, "why are you saying this now? What's changed?" I looked at Benjamin, who nodded encouragingly. "Your son and I have been corresponding for almost a year, through a military pen pal program. We didn't know who each other were at first, and by the time we figured it out, we'd already become friends." Rebecca looked confused. "I don't understand." Benjamin sat down next to his mother and took her hand. "I wrote to Grandma through a program at the nursing home. When I saw her name, I was curious about who she really was, underneath all the family drama. We've been writing letters, getting to know each other as people, rather than just as grandmother and grandson. Through our letters, I learned things about Benjamin that I never knew. His dreams, his fears, his incredible compassion and intelligence. And I hope, he learned that underneath all my criticism and control, there was love. There was always love, Rebecca. I just didn't know how to show it properly." Rebecca was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I thought you hated the choices I made. I thought you were disappointed in the life I built." "Oh, sweetheart," I said, reaching across to take her hand. "I was never disappointed in you. I was disappointed in myself. I was afraid that if I didn't push you to be perfect, you wouldn't be safe, wouldn't be happy. I thought criticism was protection. I was wrong. You raised 3 beautiful children. Benjamin is serving his country with honor. Your daughter Sarah is in college, studying to be a teacher, following her passion just like her uncle Michael. And your youngest, Tommy, I've told is kind and funny, and the videos I've seen of him made me remind so much of you at that age. You and Tom created a loving home, and your children are proof of that." Rebecca was sobbing now, and I got up from my chair to kneel beside her, something I hadn't done in years, despite my arthritis. "I'm proud of you," I said, the words I should have said decades ago. "I'm proud of the mother you became, the wife you are, the woman you've grown into. I'm sorry it took me so long to say it." She threw her arms around me then, and we held each other and cried for all the years we had lost to pride and misunderstanding. "I missed you so much," she whispered. "I missed my mom. I'm here now. If you'll have me, if you can forgive a stubborn old woman who took far too long to learn how to love properly." Over the next hour, we talked in a way we hadn't since she was a little girl. I told her about the stories I used to write, about the dreams I had given up, about the loneliness of the past few years. She told me about her marriage, about the challenges of raising teenagers, about the small joys and daily struggles that made up her life. "I want to know about your life, really know about it, not so I can fix it or improve it, but because I love you and I want to understand what makes you happy." "I'd like that," she said. "I'd like that very much." Benjamin had been quiet during most of our conversation, but now he spoke up. "Mom, there's something else. Grandma has been writing the most amazing letters. She's a natural storyteller. Maybe she should think about taking up writing again." Rebecca looked at me with surprise. "You used to write?" "A long time ago. Benjamin has been encouraging me to try again." "You should," Rebecca said firmly. "You always had such a way with words, even when you were using them to lecture us." She smiled as she said it, and I could see forgiveness in her expression. "Maybe I will," I said. "Maybe it's not too late for old dreams." As they prepared to leave, Rebecca hugged me again. "Can I come back next week? Can we try to be mother and daughter again?" "I would love nothing more," I said. "And maybe," she added hesitantly, "maybe you'd like to come to dinner sometime. At our house. Tom would love to see you, and the kids, well, they barely remember their grandmother. I'd like them to get to know you." The thought of being welcomed back into their home, of being part of their daily lives again, was almost too wonderful to believe. I would be honored, I said. After they left, I sat in my room and wrote a letter. Not to Benjamin this time, but to myself. I wrote about the woman I had been, the woman I was becoming, and the woman I still hoped to be. I wrote about second chances and the courage it takes to admit you've been wrong. I wrote about love that survives even when it's buried under years of pride and fear. The next week, Rebecca came to visit, just as she had promised, and the week after that, and the week after that. Sometimes she brought the children, and I got to know my grandchildren as the individuals they were, rather than the perfect beings I had expected them to be. Sarah was passionate about social justice and wanted to teach in underserved communities. Tommy was a gifted artist who saw the world in colors and shapes that amazed me. Benjamin visited whenever he was on leave, and our relationship continued to deepen. We still wrote letters when he was deployed, but now they were supplemented by phone calls and video chats. The friendship we had built through correspondence became the foundation for a real family relationship. 6 months after our reunion, I did something I hadn't done in over 50 years. I started writing again. Not letters this time, but stories. Stories about second chances, about families that find their way back to each other, about the courage it takes to change when change seems impossible.
Rebecca helped me submit one of my stories to a literary magazine for seniors, and to my amazement, they published it. It was a small thing, but it felt like a miracle. At 79, I was finally pursuing the dream I had abandoned so many years ago. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Rebecca said when she brought me a copy of the magazine with my story in it. "I'm proud of your courage to start over." "I learned from the best," I said, looking at my daughter who had found the strength to forgive me, to give me another chance when I didn't deserve it. A month after Rebecca and I had reconciled, she brought up something I had been both hoping for and dreading. "Mom," she said during one of our weekly visits, "Michael would like to see you too. He's been hesitant because, well, you know how things were between you two. But when I told him about our letters with Benjamin, about how you've changed, he said he'd like to try." My heart clenched. Michael, my youngest, the dreamer I had spent years trying to fix. The son who had wanted to teach children and write novels, while I had pushed him toward practical careers and realistic goals. Does he hate me?" I asked quietly. "He never hated you, Mom. He was just tired of feeling like a disappointment." When Michael walked into the common room the following week, I was struck by how much he looked like his father. The same gentle eyes, the same thoughtful expression. But there was a wariness there that broke my heart. "Hello, Mom," he said, sitting down across from me with careful distance between us. "Michael," I said, my voice catching, "I owe you the biggest apology of all. I spent years trying to change your dreams instead of celebrating them. I was wrong. So very wrong." He looked surprised. "Rebecca said you'd changed, but I wasn't sure. I heard you published a short story last year in a literary magazine. Rebecca showed me the copy. It was beautiful, Michael. It was everything I never had the courage to write myself." His eyes widened. You read it?" I did, and I was so proud I cried. "You have a gift, son, a real gift. And instead of nurturing it, I tried to crush it because I was afraid you'd struggle financially. I was afraid you'd be hurt by rejection. But I was the one hurting you all along." Michael's composure cracked and tears began flowing down his cheeks. "I just wanted you to be proud of me, just once." "I am proud of you," I said, reaching across to take his hand. "I'm proud that you followed your heart. I'm proud that you're teaching children to love literature the way you do. I'm proud that you kept writing even when I told you it was impractical. You were braver than I ever was." We talked for 2 hours that day. He told me about his students, about the novel he was working on, about the small literary community he'd found in his city. I told him about my own abandoned dreams, about the stories I was finally writing again. "Maybe," he said as he prepared to leave, "we could be writing partners. You could read my work, I could read yours. Not as mother and son, but as two writers who understand each other." "I would love that more than anything," I said. And we were. Michael and I began exchanging our writing, offering each other encouragement and gentle feedback. He helped me understand modern publishing, while I shared the wisdom of my years and experiences. Our relationship, built now on mutual respect for each other's dreams, rather than my attempts to control his, became one of the most precious gifts of my later years. A year after Benjamin's first visit, our family gathered for Thanksgiving dinner at Rebecca's house. It was the first holiday I had spent with them in over 5 years, and I was nervous about disrupting the traditions that had built without me. But as I sat at their table, surrounded by the laughter and conversation of my children and grandchildren, I realized that I wasn't disrupting anything. I was finally becoming part of something beautiful that had been waiting for me all along. "Grandma," Tommy said during dinner, "will you tell us one of your stories?" "What kind of story would you like to hear?" I asked. "Tell us about how you and Grandpa met, but tell it like one of your written stories with all the details." So I did. I told them about the USO dance, about the young soldier who was too shy to ask me to dance until his friend pushed him onto the floor, about the letters we wrote when he was overseas, and how they kept our love alive across the distance. Letters are powerful things, I said, looking at Benjamin. They can bridge any distance, heal any wound, connect any two hearts that are meant to find each other. Is that how you and Benjamin became friends? Through letters? That's exactly how, I said. Sometimes the best relationships begin with words on a page, with the courage to be honest with a stranger who might become family. As the evening wound down and I prepared to return to Sunset Manor, Rebecca pulled me aside. "Mom," she said, "I've been thinking. Your lease at the nursing home is up for renewal next month. What would you think about moving closer to us? There's a lovely senior community just 10 minutes away, and you'd have your own apartment, but also access to activities and care if you need it." The offer took my breath away. "Are you sure? I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," she said firmly. "You're my mother, and I want you to be part of our lives, really part of them, not just an occasional visitor." "I would love that more than anything," I said, tears in my eyes.
3 months later, I moved into Willowbrook Senior Living, a beautiful community with my own small apartment, a garden where I could sit and write, and most importantly, a location that put me just minutes away from my family. Benjamin, now stationed stateside, visited regularly. We still wrote letters sometimes, just for the joy of it, but now our correspondence was supplemented by weekly dinners, family game nights, and long conversations about books and life and dreams. "You know," he said to me one evening as we sat in my new apartment, "I think our pen pal program was the most successful one in military history." "How so?" I asked. "Well," he said with a grin, "it didn't just connect a soldier with a supportive civilian, it reunited a family. It helped a grandmother and grandson become friends. It gave an old woman the courage to pursue her dreams, and a young man the wisdom to understand that love sometimes comes disguised as criticism. And," I added, "it taught us both that it's never too late to start over, to be better than we were, to choose love over pride." As I write this, I'm 80 years old, and I've just finished my first collection of short stories. Rebecca is helping me find a publisher, and Benjamin has been my most enthusiastic editor and cheerleader. My stories are about second chances, about families that find their way back to each other, about the power of words to heal and connect and transform. But the most important story I ever wrote wasn't fiction at all. It was the letters I exchanged with a young soldier who turned out to be my own grandson. Letters that taught us both that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real, that families can be rebuilt even after they've been broken, and that sometimes the most profound connections begin with the simple act of putting pen to paper and telling the truth. The Pen Pal program that brought Benjamin and me together was supposed to provide comfort to a lonely soldier and companionship to an isolated senior. What it actually did was give us both something far more precious. It gave us each other, and in finding each other, we found our way back to the family we thought we had lost forever. What an absolutely beautiful story about the power of honest communication and second chances. Eleanor and Benjamin's journey shows us that it's never too late to rebuild relationships, and that sometimes love finds a way even when we think all hope is lost. What do you think about their decision to continue writing even after discovering their relationship? Have you ever had a relationship transformed by honest communication? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this incredible story of family reconciliation and the healing power of letters, please show your support by hitting that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more amazing stories every day. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.